in a secular religion of social justice. Places of worship in the nation's capital were set ablaze, while in Richmond, places of worship are marred by grotesque graffiti. The governor of Virginia, Ralph Northam, stood abreast with a minister attired in clerical garb to speak about a nation's sins, just as months before, Tim Kaine stood on the floor of the Senate to preach about the Good Samaritan in a speech to denounce the policies of the current president, while Joe Biden stood before a stained glass window to denounce the president for holding a Bible just weeks ago. Justin Wilson, mayor of Alexandria, rejoiced on social media about his opportunity to officiate at state wedding ceremonies. And perhaps that is the conception of religion and worship in Northern Virginia, where most might describe themselves as spiritual but not religious on online dating sites, and where science and reason are the preference of the most educated voters, at least by academic credential, and how ignorant or even foreign those antiquated codes and practices must appear to anyone who professes to engage in elevated discourse and intellectual discussions, like saving the planet from climate change, advocating a woman's choice to do what she wants with her body, permitting a child to choose what gender he or she prefers, opposing guns and law enforcement because Black Lives Matter, preaching how they love Trump's hate, and now in one accord with the cry, "I can't breathe." Still, pandemic crisis notwithstanding, under the First Amendment, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Yet police threatened Reverend Kevin Wilson, pastor of the Lighthouse Fellowship Church on the Eastern Shore, with prison time or a $2,500 fine for violating the state's coronavirus lockdown restrictions when the 16 parishioners in his church, all at least 6 feet apart, gathered for a worship service on Palm Sunday in a sanctuary that could easily accommodate 293 people. The pastor argued that his membership lacked internet access and could not live stream worship services for them. The church is known, according to CBN, for helping keep people free of drug addiction, mental illness, poverty, and other problems. And those members are dependent on other congregants for rides to get food, supplies, and medical appointments. Similarly, when a Latino grocer announced a free food giveaway to assist members of their community, predominantly Roman Catholics, who had lost their jobs because of sweeping lockdown orders that not even the Chinese enacted in any except 3 cities in an 8-city metropolis, the largest urban center in central mainland China. Police descended upon the crowds of over 500 at each store who came only to get food for sustenance, but who appeared to law enforcement to violate social distancing guidelines. In a recent news story about a recent suit against the lockdown order brought on behalf of businesses by Fairfax Democrat Senator Chap Peterson, Attorney General Mark Herring proudly boasted about defeating the pastor's lawsuit, as well as another suit brought by Larry Hughes, a coal miner and a teacher, who was just a Christian man who wanted to exercise his constitutional right to engage in a devotional practice for a sincerely held religious belief. But professing to be a man of faith, Northam's attorneys argued that time and again, large gatherings have provided fertile grounds for transmission of this deadly disease, and personal religious services have not been spared. One example cited in the governor's opposition brief discussed a case in Skagit County, Washington, on the Puget Sound, near Seattle and Tacoma, and named for the Skagit Indian tribe, which had been indigenous to the area prior to the European American settlement in 1883. Despite being in the greater metropolitan area of Seattle-Tacoma, before March 10th, there were no reported cases of infection. But according to Northam, of all of the other possible things to do in a large metropolitan area, it was a choir rehearsal that was found to be the cause of an outbreak of 45 cases, begging the question as to how exactly a novel coronavirus arrived at a choir rehearsal in a town with no prior cases of infection. A fact pattern just as intriguing as the farmers who found highest incidence of infection in the 8-city metropolis of Wuhan. Just as intriguing as the Americans aboard the Princess Diamond, a ship departing out of Yokohama, Japan, that found highest incidence of infection aboard that luxury cruise liner. No discernible difference between the Commonwealth of Virginia and other states, despite having the only serving governor that is a licensed and trained physician with the oath to do no harm. Black Lives Matter. I can't breathe. While a pandemic pathogen that has presently infected over 2 million nationwide has failed to produce eruptions of cluster outbreaks long past the incubation period known for this deadly pathogen in the places where protests have taken place with open violations of social distance protocols, but rather have been found to be spreading in communities that had before remained untouched. Kill one, terrify 1,000, said Sun Tsu, a philosophy which aligns with many recent descriptions about how a novel coronavirus invades the body, where it is said to hijack the cell and make it a slave to support its invasion deeper into the body, down to the lungs. But Reverend Kenny Baldwin, senior pastor of Crossroads Baptist Church in Bailey Roads, presents perhaps the most intriguing facet of battle damage assessment within the faith community in terms of conversion stories that emerge in the widely reported recoveries in the press regarding hospitalizations. The message is akin to Alexander Zhukskol, the young man who became internationally known after having removed several Pachamama statues from a Catholic church in Rome and threw them into the Tiber River, who in March wrote an open letter on his 15th day of illness to state that the virus strikes much harder than expected and hits all age groups, dispelling a belief that was questioned in some circles and a message reiterated recently by Alexandria Mayor Justin Wilson as late as mid-April, when he was still attempting to dispel the message that only the elderly become ill after 4 cluster infections, 3 of which were in nursing facilities, erupted. His message was crisply, clearly, and succinctly reported on the local news report for WUSA 9. I'm telling you, this thing is no joke, it's serious. A message inspiring fear. For as Machiavelli noted, it is far better to be feared than to be loved. And it is clear that the churches are gripped by fear, accentuated most recently by Pastor Mike Jones, Democrat Party city councilman in Richmond, who told the local Channel 8 News that his church will stay closed for members' safety. And he hopes other churches do the same, and improvising his own spin by posing the hypothetical involving a person 6 feet behind him who began to cough and asking how many persons would look back neglecting the fact that only an owl might possess the ability to line their nostrils and mouth in the direct line of sight of a droplet being expelled from another person behind them. There being sufficient evidence to support the conclusion that the vulnerability of the elderly was a known risk that could and should have been avoided, and that the faith community appears to have been targeted specifically by a biological agent that has consistently presented a migration model that departs from normal epidemiology, we will be formally presenting findings and conclusions to the Senate Select Committee for Intelligence to begin a formal investigation and hearings. My name is Major Mike Webb, and I am running for U.S. Congress. With liberty, honor, and excellence, by God, we shall make America great again. Honest.
Oh, you're a mountain from which there flows a fountain. So let its water wash my sins away. 'Cause I am a seeker and you are a keeper. You are a teacher, won't you teach me the way? Reach out and lead me, guide me and keep me in the shelter of your care each day. 'Cause I am a seeker and you are a keeper. You are a leader, won't you show me?
This advertisement was authorized by Mike Webb.
You are a leader, won't you show me?